Cloud. Okay. So good evening, everyone, and welcome to Weekly Dharma Gathering. Let me just see here. Let me just see if I could do Spotlight. I can do Spotlight. Okay, great. Really excited to have you all here and to have our teacher tonight, Leslie Booker, who will be teaching us with the talk titled Renunciation. So my name is Shante Paradigm Smalls, and I'm one of the hosts, and I'm the founder and curator of Weekly Dharma Gathering. And so I'm really excited for Booker to lead us through guided meditation and Dharma talk, and then we'll close with Q&A. Just a reminder that tonight's session is recorded. So if you prefer not to be seen, you can turn off your camera feature, or it says stop video perhaps. And you should also be muted. The recording of tonight's gathering can be accessed within 24 to 48 hours on our website, the Weekly Dharma Gathering website. And if you've registered, you will receive an email notification once it's posted. So throughout the evening, we encourage you to input any questions or comments you may have in the chat box. That's on the bottom, should be on the bottom right of the Zoom frame. So introducing Booker. Booker brings her heart and wisdom to the intersection of Dharma and embodied wisdom and activism. She shares her expertise nationally as a guest lecturer at conferences and universities on expanding our vision around culturally responsive teaching and changing the paradigm of self and community care. Booker shared practice with the most vulnerable populations in New York City for over a decade and has contributed to several books and academic papers. She is committed to working with folks to find a sense of freedom and liberation in a world that is held captive by greed, hatred, and delusion. She has graduated from Spirit Rock's Mindful Yoga and Meditation training in 2012, the Spirit Rock's Community Dharma Leaders training in 2017, and will complete the 4-year Spirit Rock residential teacher training this year. So please help me in welcoming our teacher tonight, Leslie Booker.
Mm-hmm. Hey, thank you, Shante. And good evening, everyone. I know that some of you will be catching this later on, so I just want to say good morning, good afternoon, good evenings for whenever you watch this video. And we'll begin this evening by doing a little bit of meditation together. So we'll sit for about 20 minutes. And again, I invite folks to take any of the 4 postures, whether that is sitting, standing, lying down, or walking, whatever posture works best for your body this evening. So I like to start my practice by doing some resourcing. Whether I'm home by myself or in a new environment, I really enjoy taking a moment to just allow my body to acclimate to the space that I'm in and allowing myself to rest. And so I do this by resourcing, which is a somatic experiencing technique. And so what we'll do together is to take our chin and taking it over top of our right shoulder. We're going to keep the eyes wide open as we breathe in. And as you breathe out, we're going to turn our heads moving the other direction. So we're taking in all of this information, visual information, into our bodies as we're moving the head from side to side. So what we're doing here is activating the limbic brain, the part of our brain that's connected to animals. That allows us to bring in information to know that we're safe, that we're grounded, that we're connected, that we know what's going on around us. So we can begin to notice the different colors that are in the room. So if there are colors that are red or yellow, green or blue, purple or pink, Just noticing the different colors that you're bringing in to your body and taking note of how those colors allow the central nervous system to drop in. And then beginning to notice the shapes that are around you. So soft edges, round edges, sharp edges, things that are round and square, rectangle or triangle. Noticing elements of nature. So maybe there are plants or flowers in your space. Perhaps you are looking out of a window and you can see the moon or the sun. And then taking a moment to notice the room that you're actually in, the environment that you're in. So noticing the height of the space that you're in. Noticing the width of the room that you're in. So the space to the right and to the left of your body. And then noticing the depth of the room. So the space in front of your body and the space behind your body. And just taking a note of all that surrounds you. And when you feel complete, you can rest your eyes. So for some folks in their practice, resting their eyes means to keep the eyes open, but with a soft gaze. So you're looking, but without seeing. For others, resting the eyes looks like having the eyes downcast, looking towards the tip of your nose or towards a spot on the ground. And for others, resting the eyes means to have the eyes completely closed, bringing your experience inside. And again, whether you're sitting, standing, walking, or lying down, I invite you to explore the length in the body. So knowing the length of the spine, the length of the full body, knowing the width of the body that perhaps you can explore by breathing the breath in, feeling the rib cage expand, and then breathing out, feeling the contraction in the body. And again, feeling the depth of the body, so the space in front of and behind the body. So again, perhaps that's by exploring the breath. So as you breathe in, feeling the heart, the lungs, the ribs, the belly expand as you breathe the breath in. And as you breathe the breath out, feeling the belly button reach back towards the spine. Or perhaps as you breathe out, you can feel the breath breathe out through the back body. So you can feel the lungs, the back of the lungs pressing into the chair that you're sitting in, or into the earth if you're lying down. And whatever posture you're taking, we'll begin by really rooting down into our root. So if you're sitting in a chair or standing, you can begin by lifting the toes, spreading them wide, and then feeling the toes place themselves back down onto the earth. Perhaps lifting the heels of the feet and then pressing them back down as well. So feeling a sense of rooting down, connecting, grounding into the earth. If you're sitting cross-legged, perhaps you'd like to wiggle the toes, bringing awareness to the feet connecting to your cushion, your carpet. And bringing awareness to that space between the ankle and the kneecap. So perhaps that's by flexing the calf muscles. knowing the rounding of the knees and that space between the kneecaps and the hip joints. So noticing what part of the upper leg is connecting to the earth, what might be kind of floating in midair. And then bringing your awareness to your sits bones. If you're sitting, I like to kind of wiggle around, maybe moving forward and backwards, to the right and to the left, just to see where my body is. I tend to sort of lean into my future when I'm sitting. So see what it's like to find yourself in this present moment. And if you're lying down, perhaps giving a little wiggle, feeling the back of your sacrum, that sacred bone at the base of your spine. And if you're standing, allowing the knees to be soft so you can feel the heaviness of your pelvic bone really rooting you into the earth. And you can bring your hands to the belly as we begin to find the breath in the body. So you can bring your hands to your low belly, having your fingertips overlap like this. And as you breathe in, feeling the belly expand as your fingers separate. And then as you breathe the breath out and the belly button's reaching back towards your spine, perhaps you can feel the hands coming closer towards each other again. So breathing in and breathing out through the belly. So keep taking a few breaths, taking your time, and allowing the breath to be as low in the body as you can, especially for those who live with anxiety or stress. Having the breath higher in the upper lungs or the nose can actually exacerbate that. So we'll keep the breath low. So belly, feeling the breath in the palms, or even perhaps with the bottoms of the feet. And we know the breath as we breathe the breath in. And we know the breath as we breathe the breath out. So breathing the breath in up through the body, feeling the breath expand out through the collarbones, the tips of the shoulders. And as you breathe the breath out, see if you can bring some weight to your elbows or to your fingertips, allowing the shoulders to slide away from the ears. Bringing awareness from the elbows to the wrist, and from the wrist down to the hands, the fingertips. And then bringing your awareness to the stillness of the throat, the length of the neck, and moving your attention up to the face, specifically in the jaw, noticing if the jaw is clenched, if it's tight, if the teeth are clenching down. And you can rest the tongue on the back of your teeth to create a little bit of space in the jaw. Perhaps the mouth is a little bit slack, the lips slightly parted as you create some space in the lower part of your face and your jaw. Bringing awareness to the softness of your cheeks. And you might notice the breath really predominantly in the nose right now as you bring your attention to your face. So there might be and noticing that the breath is cool as you breathe the breath in. At the top of that in breath, there's a pause, sort of a swirling around, and then a pause as that in breath turns into an out breath. And as you breathe out, you might notice the beginning, the middle, the end of that out breath. How that out breath, that exhalation might be a little bit warmer on the top of your lip. And again, there's a pause, a swirling as that out breath turns back into an in breath with a beginning, a middle, and an end. And then again, it transforms into an out breath. So taking a moment just to be with the breath, whether it be the felt sense in the nostrils, or again, exploring dropping the breath down into the belly, through the feet, through your sits bones. And then bringing awareness to your eyes. Again, allowing the eyes to be soft in whatever posture you're holding the eyes in this evening. And allowing the eyebrows to be soft. And then softening through the forehead. For many of us, without even knowing, we furrow our eyebrows or we have a strong concentration through our forehead. So if that is your tendency, you can even bring the fingertips up and just gently soften the eyes, the forehead. And then I like to imagine there is a little latch at the top of my head so I can open up that little door and allow the mind that thinks and plans and makes lists, the mind that has doubt and fear and worry, to take a break for a moment. Allowing all those things that fill the mind to float away for a moment, or to kind of Marie Kondo them and put them inside of a box and put them away, knowing that we can always return to them later. But for right now, we'll stay with being with the body, being with the felt sense of the body, knowing the body sitting, standing, walking, or lying down. Knowing the body as it breathes the breath in, and knowing the breath as the body breathes the breath out. And as the mind begins to wander, doing whatever our natural tendencies are. See if you can bring your awareness back to your anchor. So whether that's the feet rooting into the earth, that sacred bone resting on the earth, or the breath breathing itself in and the breath breathing itself out. Just coming back to that place that offers you a sense of stillness, of refuge, a sense of grounding and rooting down. So taking a moment to just gently allow yourself to perhaps flutter the eyes open or to keep the eyes closed, to allow the room to meet you at your practice. So again, good evening, everyone. So again, my name is Booker, and I'm really excited to be here on the weekly Dharma gathering. I met Shantae a few months ago at the gathering, which was this really beautiful gathering of about 75 teachers of African descent at Spirit Rock. So folks who had come from different lineages, some didn't not knowing that there were other folks that looked like them in Buddhism. So it's just so beautiful to be with that group of people and then to know that this weekly gathering was happening, a space for Black, Indigenous, POC, and folks in the Alphabet Sangha to come to practice together and to hear teachings from folks that look and sound like them. So I just want to first offer deep gratitude and bows to all those who are involved in making this space available to all of us. So I initially entitled this talk just Renunciation. I couldn't think of a more creative um, title, but I've been really thinking a lot about renunciation. And as I thought more about what renunciation means to me and who I'm speaking to, I thought that this talk is really about renunciation and how we get free. because renunciation isn't just about letting go, but it's about letting go so that we can have a sense of freedom and liberation in our own hearts, minds, and body. And so here we are at the beginning of the year. We are still in January. So that first month of the year where we're still kind of holding on to the residuals of the year that just passed and trying to figure out what we want this new year to look like, how we want to be, what we want to let go of, what we want to abandon, what we want to cultivate, who we want to be in this, not only this new year, but this new decade. It's a great opportunity for us to really hit that pause button and to consider and to do really big, great, deep transformational work right now. And we need time and space and breath to create that time for us to move into this new iteration. We need that sacred pause. I've been out in California for the past 3 weeks. In fact, I just came in on the red eye this morning, which is always a bad idea, but that's what I did. And so when I was out west, I was sitting, I was teaching, I was training, and I also spent some time with my teacher, Philip Moffat. And Philip was speaking a lot about Janus, who is the Greek god of transition. So this person is kind of guards over doorways, passageways, gates, and endings. They tend to be present when there's transitions in time from wartime to peacetime, from one year to the next year. And Janus is often depicted as one with two faces sort of back to back. So one head, one face sort of looking in the past and the other face looking forward. And so I often think of that old adage of, to know where we're going, we need to know where we've been. And that might be rooted and, based in that character. And so many of us have these rituals that we end and begin our years with. My honey and I every year do this annual Southern holiday road trip. And so my girlfriend and I, we pack our bags and we drive from Connecticut, where we currently live, and we drive all the way down the east coast of Florida, where her parents are. So we visit my family in Virginia and then a bunch of friends up and down the East Coast. And we always get back on New Year's Eve, usually around 6 p.m. on New Year's Eve. And accidentally, we started this ritual of watching When Harry Met Sally, the classic indie romantic comedy that kind of started the genre of romantic comedy, starring Meg Ryan and Billy Crystal. And so this annual ritual that we started has given me that sacred pause in a really weird way. It gives me a chance to laugh, to cry, and to remember that at the end of the day, everything is going to be okay, that everyone's going to get what they need and everything's going to be fine. And so whatever your annual end of the year ritual is, it gives us a chance to pause, to reflect upon where we've been and where we want to go. It gives us introspection and, most importantly, a chance for us to rest and to really be with the reality of our lives. And for some, this pause is really fun. We get a chance to see what we've accomplished over the year, what we've learned, how we've grown, and how we want to continue that on. And for most of us, this can be kind of stressful. It might bring up a lot of anxiety and doubt, fear, perhaps even anguish or judgment about why we're making that same resolution again, why we didn't hold the resolution, the promise we made to ourselves from the year before, why we're still in this space of suffering, and what can we do? What is that thing that keeps getting in the way of us moving forward? And so, as I mentioned, I was spending some time with my teacher, Philip Moffat, when I was out in California. And he was asking us to sit with these 3 questions. So one of them was, what is it within me that needs to let go? what is it that needs to be cultivated? So what is it that I need to, what skills I need to bring in? And the third question is, what is it that needs to be accepted? And then he asked us to not only reflect on these three questions, but also to really be with what is our question. So what is the thing that we really need to explore, to be with, to really live into as we move into the new year? And my question, and also with a caveat, which I really appreciated, was as best as I am able. So remembering that we are human beings with a lot of things that get in the way, a lot of um, epigenetic, blocks and barriers that might prevent us from moving forward or to going as deep as we want into these explorations. And so again, what needs to be, what do I need to let go of? What needs to be cultivated and what needs to be accepted to the best of my ability? So what is our question? Where is our most resonance? Where is our growing edge around this? And for me, it was really what I need to let go of. I am a holder of many things, being kind of the greedy type. And so I was really thinking what I need to let go of. I am also very stubborn. And so I like to hold on and make sure that everyone knows that I'm right and they're wrong. And that's something that I'm really working with in my practice. And so I also realized that this letting go wasn't just about letting go, abandoning, creating this hole, this void, but also about cultivating. So I could create a space in my heart, my body, and my mind. So I could hold this new attitude. I could hold criticism. I could hold myself tenderly when I'm having a bad day. And so this letting go created space for me to invite in these new things that I wanted to be with. The tenderness that I really wanted to hold my body, my mind, my heart, my experiences within. So it's very similar to yoga for those who practice any sort of martial arts or yoga. We take a breath in to create this space in our bodies. And with the space that we've created, we're then be able to move into that space as we breathe out. We're able to deepen this groove, to go deeper in stretching, deeper in allowing, deeper in the exploration of what's possible. And so we use the breath, we use the body to move at the speed of trust in this letting go and in this growing, this exploration. Last month, I was invited to offer a keynote at a really big conference. It was the Healing and Recovery Through Integrative Medicine Conference in Connecticut. And it was a room of about 400 people, about 300 practitioners, so medical professionals and healing arts professionals, and then about 100 people were folks who were in active recovery. So these are folks who were the recipients of these practices, which were yoga, acupuncture, qigong, mindfulness practices. And at the end of the conference, at the end of my talk, these two young men walked up to me, and one of them had said that he had been clean and sober for 7 years and was really doing great with his sobriety, but realized that without something to land on, that he wasn't able to hold his sobriety. So it wasn't just about not drinking, about not using, there's also about filling up that void. And so without anything to put in there, he went back to using. And so he said that this time around, by having these practices of using acupuncture and mindfulness, he felt like he was really on the right path to allow this new sobriety to be sustainable, to last, to be with him for a long time. So really giving something to put into that emptiness that he was feeling. And so I want to spend my time with you speaking of renunciation, about letting go and getting free from the things that hold us in bondage, about creating space so that there can be a cultivation of wisdom and discernment, and that we can thrive within this space. So we'll touch upon compassion, which we need in all of this, and really supports us through this process. And about the importance of moving at the speed of trust. For many of us, we're starting this year with this new resolution, this promise that we've made to ourselves, this intention that we have put out there. And in the Western Vipassana insight lineage in which I study and teach in, we call this intention as known as Samma Sankappa. And it's one of the paths in the Eightfold Path, which are these paths that lead us towards liberation. And Samma Sankappa is defined as a mental thought that creates the commitment to carry out an action. So it starts with the mind, and then it trickles down into the body, moving in towards action. A few years ago, a young man that I was mentoring was working with intention. And he said, I'm finding my intention is like my home, the place I can come back and reside in, that's safe and larger than my small sense of I, that it nearly becomes synonymous with presence, because it's the motivation that brings me back. It's not a narrow goal that I can judge myself for not meeting. It's a larger identity that I can live inside. And so I really love the notion, the idea of living inside of my intention. There's something very physical about it. There's this, it feels very active and alive, and like there's a movement in it. So I love the idea of living inside. It's this living, breathing thing that we have to constantly feed and nurture. And so we create these intentions, these resolutions every year, and we write them down and we speak them out loud to people. We put them on a vision board. And once they're known, we can't unknow them. And so we begin to live our lives and to view the world through this lens of the intention in which we have laid out for ourselves. And it reminds me of a line from the Sangha River, which is this really beautiful essay written by Thich Nhat Hanh. And he says that we begin to look with Sangha eyes, to feel with a Sangha heart, and to walk with Sangha feet. And so we're taking everyone along on the journey with us. And we begin to move, to think, to act, to feel in a way that is not just about our own gain, but about the welfare and the liberation for all beings. And so our intention, our resolutions are not just for us, it's for the freedom for all of us. The Buddha explains that right or skillful intention is threefold. So there's the intention of renunciation, there's the intention of goodwill, and there's the intention of harmlessness. And so as we cultivate these three renunciations, we're also eradicating their opposites, which are greed, ill will, and creating harm to others. And so in this talk, I'm going to be speaking about the first tenet of renunciation, of intention, which is renunciation. And so historically, when I think of renunciation or setting a resolution, I think of all the things that I can't have. And I think for a lot of us, that's also what we think of. We know what we're going to deprive ourselves of these things. And so, this year, I've already blown it, but I was like, this year is the year that I'm totally going to get vegan, right? I'm going to be 100% vegan. I'm doing it. And I did great until my friend took me to this amazing Italian restaurant last night, and we had to have like their amazing wood burning stove pizza. So that completely went out the window last night. Or, I'm going to stop eating potato chips every day, or I'm only going to watch one episode of The Watchmen. I'm not going to binge that show, right? And so all these things are really, really good intentions, or really good things to think about, to cultivate, to soften around, right? But when our intention becomes the enemy, and renunciation turns into a bad word, that's when we get into trouble. Because we begin to associate renunciation with this rigid asceticism, completely void of joy, completely void of liberation and freedom. But it becomes this tightness, or like, I can't have that, I can't have that, and I can't have that. And so over the past few years in my practice, I've been thinking a lot about renunciation, and holding renunciation not only as the things that, I can't have, but also more about these gateways, these portals to a deeper set of mindfulness, these portals towards wisdom and compassion. Renunciation really gave me the opportunity to uncover all that is actually available to me when I let go of a mind that clings to and grasps to greed, especially. It gives me the availability to pause and to consider what I gain from letting go of unskillful actions, of unskillful thoughts, and unskillful patterns in my life. And what might impact not only my own heart and mind, but how it impacts the person sitting in front of me, my sangha, my community, my city, my town, and the world at large. In my lineage, lay practitioners hold 5 precepts, these ethical guidelines of how we're going to refrain from unskillful behaviors to protect ourselves and others. We undertake the precept to not kill, to not steal, to not use our sexuality to harm others, to not use divisive language, and to not use intoxicants. But they're not guiding us towards what we can do, right? It's all of this what we can't do. And so when we're told that we can't do something, we're kind of left kind of floating around trying to figure out what kind of skillful actions that we can work with. And so what are these actions that can lead us towards a sense of freedom from fear, freedom from aggression, and freedom from harm? And so I've been working with a version of the precepts that offers this view of knowing how deeply our lives intertwine. So bringing in this interconnectedness, right? That my actions, what I do, completely impacts you, people in my life, and my community. And so knowing how deeply our lives intertwine, I undertake the precept to protect life, to be generous, to protect the sexuality of myself and others around me, to use language that actually brings a harmonious relationship with others, and to consider all of the intoxicants that cloud my heart and mind, which includes things like social media, the news media, not buying into the narrative that Hollywood and magazines tell me about people who look like me. So really letting go of all of that. And in there is wisdom. There is discernment. There's no repression or deprivation in renunciation. It is actually this great sense of liberation and abundance that I can cultivate in my own practice and in my life. Renunciation is also one of the 10 paramis, and these are a collection of these perfections that we can use, again, to live a life with more harmony and with more freedom. And the other 9 of the paramis are generosity, virtue, wisdom, energy, patience, truthfulness, resolve, benevolence, and equanimity. So this sense of finding balance and equipoise in how we hold all of our practices. Ajahn Sucitto, who is a monastic in our lineage, suggests that renunciation takes the mind to a more stable place where it can gain access to great ease and clarity. And so all of the paramis, all of these practices of perfecting ourselves and how we move through the world are deeply rooted in wisdom. And renunciation is really counterculture, right? Like we live in this world that tells us that the more that we collect, whether it be power or money or things, technology we have to grasp and hold, like this gaining, clinging, owning. Renunciation says that that's actually not good, which is counterculture to the world that we live in that says that greed is good, right? And so even in our spiritual practice, we can find some renunciation, some space in our own practice, because even there we can find a sense of clinging and grasping and holding on tightly to it. We've all had times in our practice where we're holding on so tightly, believing that if I could just get to the third jhana state, then I'd be free, right? If I could just forgive that person who has harmed me, then I would be happy. And so what happens when we're holding on so tightly? So if we can just get to this stage in our practice, then we'll be free. It keeps putting us back into this trap, right? This trap that we're believing that we are fundamentally and inherently inadequate. That holding on tighter is going to give us more freedom and liberation, which we all know from our own experience that it simply doesn't. We forget that we are nature in this human form, that this body is a microcosm of the natural world, that we are made up of earth, water, fire, and air. And just like nature, we are inherently subject to change. We are rooted in impermanence. There is nothing that is still or permanent or fixed in our existence. We are constantly moving, evolving, and changing. And with the cultivation of wisdom, we're not grasping and clinging and wanting things to always be the same. We can remember that things arise, they abide, and they pass away. And that is the path that leads us back to our freedom and to our liberation. For many years, for over a decade actually, living in New York City, I worked with and shared practice with very vulnerable populations. So folks who are experiencing homelessness, who are living with HIV and AIDS, who were and mostly with folks who were incarcerated. And I spent a lot of many years working with young people who were locked up. So children who were 12 to 16 years old who were locked up and away from their families. And working with these populations who have been discarded by society, and sharing practice with them and seeing how they could know these practices of freedom and liberation really verified and deepened my own practice. So whenever we would have a new person, a new young person that would come into my class, I would often offer them the singing bowl, and I would ask them to ring the bell and to see if they could make some sound come out of it. And every single person would hold the bell tightly, and then they would ring it. And they would realize that they couldn't get any sound, nothing would come out as they were holding tightly. And so it was this beautiful metaphor that we could share with them, that if we could let go, if we could find some freedom, if there's some spaciousness, then we could really allow ourselves, our bodies to feel free, and therefore to create beautiful music. So they would open their hands and they would hear this. And they would always be so amazed and surprised that it was the letting go that brought about such beauty. I worked with a young girl. She was probably 13 or 14, and she had been locked up for a while. Back home, she had the usual stressors of being a teenager, as well as being locked up and away from her family, awaiting trial, not knowing how long she'd be locked up for. And also, she had a baby at home. So, also worrying about the welfare of her child. Would her family be able to care for her child? Would her child end up in foster care? So she had a lot of stress in her life. And so one time I asked her to explain what mindfulness meant to her. She could explain it to the new students who were in the room. And the way that she described it, she said, "My life typically feels like this. Like it's really tight. I have all these different things going on in my life, so many things that I'm stressed out, as well as the peer pressure, because that also follows you into jail and, people who want what you have." And she's like, "So my life feels like this. It's so tangled. And I get really confused and I don't know what to do first. I don't know what to attend to first. I don't know what's important. I don't have the discernment to figure out what isn't important, what I should let go of." And so she said, "So moving through life like this, when I sit down and do my practice, it begins to kind of soften. And then there's this space in between everything. And so it's not like anything has gone away, but there's now the space in between. So there's clear view, there's clear knowing. She could see every single thing and then could put things in order as to what was actually important for her." And I thought that was such a beautiful visual to explain how we move through life and how our practice can create that space, how that renunciation, that letting go of being so fixed and tight and rigid, can allow us the spaciousness to see what we actually want to cultivate, what we want to bring into our lives. And so it let goes of this narrative, right? Of this second, third, and fourth arrow that says that that helps us to see what we need to tend to. And so this, as I mentioned earlier, this physicality, this activeness of letting go, this intentionality, this engagement of renunciation, for many of us comes through this deep listening, this wisdom of our body. And not by our own fault, but by um, being folks who have historically been oppressed, enslaved, marginalized, um, uh, taken away from our homes, and harmed in so many other different ways. We've forgotten how to listen to our intuition, how to drop into the wisdom of this body, this primordial teacher which lives inside each and every one of us. So this is from Zenju Earthlyn Manuel, who is a Zen priest, who's also a Black queer woman elder. She says, this is from her book, The Way of Tenderness. And she says, "I had come not to trust my own innate wisdom by internalizing the judgments of those who felt that certain types of folks are lesser. I had betrayed myself. I had yielded to oppression. Oppression is a distortion of our own nature, of our true nature. It disconnects us from the earth and from each other. Awakening from the distortion of oppression begins with tenderness. We recognize our own wounded tenderness, which develops into the tenderness of vulnerability and culminates in the tenderness that comes with heartfelt and authentic liberation." And so there is this invitation that she is offering, this invitation to go back and to understand our true nature, to remember that we are these four elements that I spoke of earlier, subject to change, to let go of the narrative that we don't have the capacity or the skill or the right environment, the right resources or the right conditions to let go. and to be free. And so it's easy for us to fall in that distortion that Zenju speaks of, to be led away from the body, to be led away from our intuition, to be led away from the wisdom of the body, especially for those who've been harm displaced. To slow down, to get quiet enough to listen. We have to turn towards a fierce vulnerability to do this, to move towards this tenderness. And so it's important for us to move at the speed of trust, to remember that this letting go isn't an abandoning, this quick letting go, but it's actually this gentle release of letting go drop by drop by drop when we're ready to titrate, to know our anchor, to root back down, to be in the body so that we can let go a little bit more, come back and resource, and then let go a little bit more. We're not moving towards this definitive destination. Liberation and freedom looks different for all of us, but we're exploring what's possible along this journey. And we explore this practice as being reflective, as being a receptive practice, so deeply rooted in the feminine, and not this ideal of asceticism, of this rigid deprivation. So what we gain by letting go, we get to let go of the three poisons of greed, hatred, and delusion. Especially the delusion that blocks our hearts and our minds. We get to create this space, and in this space we can cultivate compassion, we can cultivate clear knowing, and I can liberate my mind from the intoxicants that allows fears, that allows fear and doubt to take over, that prevents me from loving, from deepening my relationships with myself and with others around me. And that block that prevents me from the possibility of liberation for all beings. And so we can choose to remain in the dukkha, right? We can choose to remain in turning towards suffering. All that suffering that comes from allowing fear, anger, frustration, and all that's happening in the world to colonize our hearts, our minds. Or we can create this world that allows us to be connected, to be in loving relationship, that allows to a world that moves away from sickness and illness and move towards healing and safety and deep care. And that is what our renunciation does. It allows us to move towards freedom. So thank you for your kind attention and consideration of how we can work with renunciation in our own lives and what that can look like for us. And so I'll pause for a minute just to allow the words to sink in, and to also open up to see if there's any questions from Shantae. I also love what a dear teacher of my lineage, Bonnie Duran, speaks of, which is wisdom democracy, which is not just, this sort of, colonizers' view of like questions and answers, like you have a question, I have the answer, but to actually be in a sense of us sharing wisdom. So wondering if, Shantae, you have any wisdom that you glean from this talk, or anything that you want to share or ask into.
Thank you, first of all, for your talk, Booker. That was really wonderful. Maybe the best talk I've ever heard on renunciation. And it's really related, I think, to the question that was coming up for me as you were talking about a number of things, as you were talking about paramitas, as you were talking about the relationship between practice and the material world, as you were talking about working with, one of the most vulnerable populations. And I'm wondering a lot about, I've been thinking about the way that the Dharma, and also I know you're a yoga teacher, the way that these practices really within Dharmic or mindfulness communities can often be weaponized to shut down or to even gaslight emotion. And I think because Western Dharma has been really filtered through whiteness, coming from, teachers from Tibet and Japan and Thailand and Southeast Asia and India, but the first students were mostly middle-class white folks. And I feel that the cultural interpretations of some of these practices and words often get used to promote a culture of niceness rather than a culture of kindness or a culture of radical insight.
Yeah.
And so I'm wondering, because you spoke so beautifully about like opening, unfolding what the different levels of renunciation. My dog is shaking. I'm wondering if that's something that obviously I think you thought about it. I was just, your talk was so beautifully, I think, explicitly sort of doing that. So that's just, I don't know, it's just what occurred to me. I've been really thinking about the weaponization of, of wakefulness.
Yeah. And, I like that you said this, like, being quiet, having the eyes downcast have been sort of like weaponized. I think a lot about that. Obviously, I do think a lot about it. And I was at a gathering of newer Dharma teachers, and we were speaking of and wondering, because I teach very relationally, and my retreats, even though I hold them in somewhat noble silence, there's a lot of relational practices before we move into silence. And coming out, there's a lot of dropping in and coming back between silence and relationship. And for folks of color, for queer folks, our liberation, our freedom, our mere survival has come from reaching out and being in relationship. And so it can feel really oppressive. The first time I was on retreat with 100 people and doing walking meditation and being told to close my eyes, keep my mouth shut, keep my eyes, looking down, bring my hands behind my back, and to do this walking practice. And it felt a little rigid. And I remember one of my mentors, Stan Greer, a Black queer man, when we were teaching walking meditation and Jill is working with young people, and he wanted to offer those instructions. I'm like, how do we tell these young people to close their eyes, keep their mouth shut, bring their hands behind their back and walk? It looks like how they have to walk in prison. It looks like an oppressive tactic to keep them in their place. How do we allow this to be a practice of liberation and freedom? And so he asked them to bring their arms behind their backs so that they could lift their hearts with dignity and pride, and to walk as if they are kings and queens with this dignity that they've cultivated in their bodies. And so shifting the language, shifting the paradigm, considering who you're speaking to and their history, not just our current traumas that we're living in, the world that we're living in today, but also the epigenetics that we're coming in, our history of enslavement, our history of oppression, our history of being kidnapped, raped, removed from our countries by force. So how do we consider all of that as we're offering these practices. And so there is a fierce vulnerability, this vulnerability that we're asked to move into because it's urgent. Our freedom is urgent. And so, I encourage people to, if you're not finding the right teacher who speaks in a way that that resonates for you, that resonates, that can speak to your experience, to find other teachers. I love this platform. I love the Liberate app. Different ways for folks to understand what their Dharma looks like.
Thank you. I'm just gonna ask Sheila's question or comment. Booker, thank you so much for your wisdom. I'm sitting with Move at the Speed of Trust. It's such a timely and beautiful talk. I have to run, but look forward to doing into the rest later. So just a little appreciation for your tremendous wisdom. And I think, did you want to read a poem to end, or are you okay?
Yeah.
And then I'll make some announcements, which can include your any announcements you have about.
All right.
Okay.
Yeah. So I have two things that I wanted to read, and I'll just read one, but tell you about the other one. So one is this poem by Pablo Neruda called "Keeping Quiet." And it's such a beautiful poem that speaks about the importance of coming into stillness, of being quiet, so that we can really listen to the deep wisdom of our body. And so Keeping Quiet by Pablo Neruda, I invite everyone to listen to read. He was a Chilean politician and poet who was exiled. Beautiful, beautiful poet. But I'd love to dedicate the merit by reading For All Beings by Zenju Earthlyn Manuel. This can be held as a metta practice for some, and for others it can just be held as a dedicating the merit, so a wish for all beings. So she writes, may all beings be cared for and loved, be listened to, understood, and acknowledged despite different views. Be accepted for who they are in this moment. Be afforded patience. Be allowed to live without fear of having their lives taken away or their bodies violated. May all beings be well in its broadest sense. Be fed, be clothed, be treated as if their life is precious. Be held in the eyes of each other as family. May all beings be appreciated, feel welcomed anywhere on the planet. Be freed from acts of hatred and desperation, including war, poverty, slavery, and street crimes. Live on the planet housed and protected from harm. Be given what is needed to live fully without scarcity. Enjoy life, living without fear of one another. Be able to speak freely in a voice and mind of undeniable love. May all beings receive and share the gifts of life. Be given time to rest, be still, and experience silence. May all beings be awake.
Thank you. I love that. Thank you so much. So I just have a couple of announcements. Thank you again, Booker, for your amazing talk. And there are a lot of people who signed up to watch it, who registered to watch it. So the talk will be available in the next 24 to 36 hours. Next week, and thank you everyone else who joined us. Next week's talk on January 29th will be with Ashley Dinges, who will be giving a talk titled, sorry, let me just bring it up here. Walking the Walk, the 6 Paramitas. So Booker talked about the paramis tonight, and there'll be a nice continuation next week with talking about the perfections. So you can find more detail in chat box. I'll put it here, or you can just go to our website at Weekly Dharma Gathering. I don't know if you can see the chat box on the recording, but I'll just, you can go to Weekly Dharma Gathering. I'll share the screen so you can see the, everyone can see that. Oops. There you go. And stop sharing. And Leslie, did you want to share any upcoming events that you have?
Sure. So I'm taking the month of February off so I can rest, which I'm very excited about. Actually, this weekend, I do have a resident urban retreat at New York Insight with Bart Van Mellick. We are actually sold out with a wait list, but we'll be doing more of those in the future. So check out New York Insight for that. In March, I'll be back out at Spirit Rock doing a retreat with Ann Cushman. It's an embodied retreat. So really bringing the body into the Dharma, which is really lovely. I'll be teaching with Jack Kornfield in June at Kripalu in Western Massachusetts.
Awesome.
At the end of the year, again, I'll be teaching another retreat at Spirit Rock over Labor Day weekend with James Beres, Howie Cohn, Charlotte Rodell. So if there are retreats at Spirit Rock or teachers you've been wanting to sit with, but you're afraid of being in an all-white space, these are places where you can come and know that there's going to be a teacher of color who's got you. And I know that's for a lot of folks, we don't learn from other teachers. We don't go to certain spaces because we're afraid of like the whiteness of those spaces. So please check out these websites, see when there are teachers of color teaching, and come be with us because we don't also want to be the only ones there.
And where can people find you? Do your website and your social media?
So my website is lesliebooker.com. And then you can also go to Spirit Rock's website and look up my name and see all the retreats that I'm teaching. You can search my name at Spirit Rock. And then other things will be coming up, sprinkled out that are not quite up yet. But a lot of things, a lot of weekend retreats are coming up, especially on the East Coast. And then also in California later on in the year. Check out my website. We'll keep updating it.
Thank you so much again, Leslie. Thank you everyone who joined it live, and thank you everyone who watched the recording, and we'll see you next week.
Thank you. Bye.